On my last video, I showed you when setting up a new server, a new Linux container, or if you're logging into a remote server and you get this error warning, remote host identification has changed. I showed you how to delete the last entry off of your known host so that you can basically try again. But now I'm at the point where I'm trying to eliminate the login password. So you'll recall that I had gone into Microsoft PowerShell because they have SSH, and I had shown you why the networking context requires me to do this as opposed to my other favorite place, which is a Windows subsystem for Linux, because Windows subsystem for Linux has its own networking context, and you got a whole client host situation kind of thing. So there's decisions to be made about networking context, and this Linux container that I'm using has a networking context that I really ought to show you for this all to be clear. When this thing was set up originally, let me go to containers. This is my network application server. This is a thing called Container Station, a very, very junior version of Kubernetes for running containers. I hear Chrome OS has a great way of doing this. I want to look into that. So this little copy of Ubuntu Bionic is actually running, and when I attempt to log in to it using this icon here that I keep around, well, I deleted that last line. So if I type yes here, it's still going to prompt me for a password, and I could provide it, and then I can log out. And even having that signature recorded now, it's still going to prompt me for the password. So we want to eliminate that prompt for a password, because popping into this and doing stuff should be as easy as just opening any other terminal. Even though it's into a remote server in my house, it nonetheless shouldn't password prompt me. And that's what the public-private key system in Unix, Linux, and really all systems supported now is for. And yeah, so when I type this command to attempt to log in to that machine, which is what's happening, by the way, when I double click this icon, the shortcut that's appearing, you go into properties, you pick that up, you go over here, backspace over that command, and then paste it in. It's just a longer version of that. It's doing it, telling some context things for PowerShell. So if you back up over that, this is everything that should be required to log in without a password, yet it doesn't work. So I've been researching it, and I found that some of the stuff in play is just, editing things in your open SSH config file. So I've been doing that. So I prefer to do it here so that the colors are the colors I like. And it's going to be in my command line because I had done it not too long ago. You can see all the work I had been doing to get this right, so I can show you the right thing finally. So this file is right here. It's the config file for OpenSSH, found as many things are in Linux for configuration in the etc directory, etc/ssh/sshhd_config. I already edited this line in to allow my user to be allowed. I even edited this one in to allow public key authentication. Now, in my latest research, I realized that there also should be this authenticated keys file, because without that, it's not going to work. And that really becomes the subject of this video, in addition to moving keys around. So if we were to go onto my local machine, albeit Linux, so you see I'm on Windows, but because this is Windows subsystem for Linux, this path here that you might recognize as C:\users username is mounted in a mount location under Windows subsystem for Linux. You can tell it's my machine because Lunderwand, that's my laptop. I'm also forcing it into a Python virtual environments. There's a lot of interesting stuff going on there. But I can go into that SSH location of my Windows home by cd up from my place I push myself in automatically, cd.ssh, a secret directory that's even on Windows home directories. ls, and you can see the files that are located in there. I have a pair of generically named RSA files, or I don't have a pair, I just have a single one. I'll probably get rid of that because it's not a public-private pair set. Same with this. What you want to have is your private key and your public key. They got to be paired. These are probably cruft left over from the past that I'll be getting rid of. So your private key always stays on your machine. You wouldn't, I wouldn't show that on my screen here. But public keys get given out. Those get given out to the machine that you log in on. And because this is a Windows location, I can actually just type open, and that'll open that location. I'll show you my profile. This is my .bashrc profile. You can see that's my .bashrc profile right there. And in there I have the alias open doing explorer.exe to my current location, right? So I can just type open, and bam, there's a window, Explorer, with all that, private public key stuff there. So I think it's also good to show you the old school way. There's different ways to open Explorer. I like the Windows key with E. That's will open Windows Explorer. I'll put it over here, and then I'll go to the very traditional drill down path that Microsoft has been hiding more and more from people because it's enough power to shoot yourself in the foot. Going under this PC, and under this PC you're going to have your C drive, right? There it is, local disk C. And under your C drive you're going to have a users drive. There's users. And under users you're going to have your username. And under username you're going to have the secret directory location .ssh. I have it so that it shows those hidden files. You might have to do the same. And so there's the same directory that I got into from terminal side, just typing open once I was CD'd into it. So there's some good integration between Windows Subsystem for Linux and Windows itself. And I happen to actually have a way to get my public key, that's this file here, into the container running on my NAS. So I have a network application server here. This is actually part of it. I'll close that for now. That was from a prior attempt to give you this demonstration. And now to see what's really going on, whenever I attempt to SSH into this thing, it's because I have a specific network context set up that you can see by going into settings and advanced. And this is my network context. Any attempts to connect to port 2222 on my QNAP server. It's a server I actually have sitting over there. It's a little, network application server. And its networking protocol is as network address translation. Too many NAs because it's from QNAP. So I'm running an NAT mode on an NAS from QNAP. Alphabet soup. Anyway, any attempt to connect to port 2222 on my network application server gets forwarded to port 22, which is the traditional SSH port on the container, on this little LXC/LXD container I'm running. So really, I believe they're all LXCs, Linux containers, running under the daemon, LXD, D for daemon, Linux daemon. So the other thing I want to show you here is, in addition to that providing the way to SSH into the container, I have a shared folder set up. That shared folder is one of the network locations set up by the NAS. That's on this server. And I'm saying that any attempt, or that I'm creating a mount point in my container saying in this location /MNT/FairyNatland, map in the parent's location, FairyNatland. So that means that once I'm logged in on that server, I have that location and can access it. That's the way to get the public key. So where is that location when I'm on my Windows host? Well, Windows key E opens another Explorer. Zip, right here. It's like a letter drive. It's like an old-fashioned letter drive. You know, it's like on Windows, you have your, you know, C drive, your D drive, your X drive, your M drive. I have it mapped as my F drive. I kid you not. Boom. My public key is now on the NAS. That NAS is accessible to that container. So I can log into that container with a password. It's still going to be password challenged. But now, if I go to that location /MNT, you'll see I've got Fairy Natland. When I CD into Fairy Natland, into LS, there's my key. That key is accessible now from inside this container, inside this LXD container. I need to move that into location. You'll remember from the prior video, I created cd:/.ssh, ls, nothing in there right now, nothing in there. I blanked it out because I had done a few test runs, a few failed test runs. But this process is so important because it gives me my remote location to run code. And doing it smoothly as if you're just opening a terminal is so important. You need a 24/7 place to run your code. That's what this is about. Can't do it on your laptop because your laptop has a lot of things that can go wrong with it. You want to be doing it on a headless Linux server, which is what this is. So I go back to cd/mount/fairynatland because it's easier to type that than this stuff here. So I go cp for copy that public key, and I put that public key in home directory, hidden SSH file. I can put a trailing slash, but it knows to put it inside the file. So now I can cd back to that /.ssh ls, and there's a file in there, whereas there used to not be. And you would think that's enough. Now, these are the one-line entry things that get plugged into known hosts. But from my research, I also found out there is a file called authorized keys in that same directory. So whereas on a local machine, it becomes known hosts, on the remote machine running the OpenSSH server, you need equivalent files called authorized keys. Now I'm going to show you. I'm going to do a before and after. So I edited out that line. So this is where, you know, authorized keys are permitted. But even before editing out that line, what I'm about to show you was still happening. So here's the public key authentication. Turn to yes. The users that's allowed is Ubuntu. And the command I'm issuing from the command line is telling it where to get where to look at my private key and how to connect in as user Ubuntu on port 2222 on that piece of hardware. So this should all work. I will do a complementary restarting of the service, sudo service SSH full restart. Well, before I do that, I'm going to do sudo service. You can see the services that are running. Sudo service status all. Whoops. You can see all the services that are running. I had to add this service. A bare bones thing is not going to have OpenSSH installed and turned on necessarily anymore because of just general hardening and lockdown of container distributions. So I deliberately apt-get installed OpenSSH-server to get this server going. And that file you saw me editing was the configuration for this. And sometimes you got to restart these things. So it's sudo service name full restart. Oh. Helps when you spell it right. So this is restarting the SSH server, though why it doesn't log me off is a little bit of a mystery. I'm going to exit out, which will disconnect. And then this is where I thought I should have been getting logged in without password challenge, but I'm still password challenged. just as a reminder. Well, it doesn't matter. I need to finish that one out. Just as a reminder, when I double click that icon, it's doing the exact same thing as this command here. And you'll see when I run it here, likewise, I'm still challenged for the password. So I'll Control C out of that because I like to do this next step where the background colors are nicer. So I do it here. Exact same thing as what's going on over there in PowerShell. In fact, this is PowerShell. This is Windows PowerShell with that command in the shortcut and some color adjustments. So I log in with the password. I go over to cd //.ssh ls-la to show me everything in there. You'll see that only my public key is the only thing in there. Now this public key is just like, it's a long line, but it's a single line. I want that single line to be the first entry in a file known as authorized keys. It's a list of authorized keys, just like the known hosts file exists on the local machine. How do you make this one line entry the first line in a file called known hosts? You copy it because it's the first line in the file. The only difference I'm making, it's the only change I'm making, I'm copying my public key file to be named known host. Think about that. It's a one-line entry. All new known hosts will be appended onto this, but the first one I can establish with a copy. See? Okay. And now we'll restart the server. I believe the command line history is in common between different logins. I'm not entirely sure, but anyway, now we exit out. And now, dun dun dun, drum roll please. Okay, let's do last check here. There's one more thing that we might need to do. I'm not 100% sure. I'm going to double check my work. First, we're going to did I copy it as known hosts? cd //.ssh ls. I did. I called it known hosts. That was my problem. It's authorized keys. That's the trick you would do on a local machine to establish your known host file. So I'm going to do that same command that I did the copy with, but it's authorized keys. Well, in fact, I'll just move it. Move known hosts authorized keys ls, right? So it's just those two files. I double check the file name against my notes. That's correct. I restart the server and I try and make this now a new climax. Dun dun dun. Haha! No password challenge. There, you saw it right there in front of you. You saw it right there in front of you. So all I did is in the hidden SSH directory in your home location, I created a file called authorized keys that was that was the same content as my public key of the machine that I'm logging in from. So there's a few machines in the picture. I should probably draw this for you, but you get the idea. This is in a container on a physically separate server than the machine I'm looking at. So all kinds of advantages from containerization. Similar stuff is what people talk about with Docker, but Docker, blah. This is all persistent here. I have no composing and patches and all that weirdness that Docker brings to the picture. It's just a Linux server. It's just a Linux server, just as if it were real hardware. Yeah, that's mission accomplished here. The important thing here is that inside a location called etc, inside a folder here called SSH, different SSH, this is where config stuff is done. There is, amongst other things, a file that configures your OpenSSH server. There's a few versions there. It's the one with two S's, SSH_config. I don't know enough about these things to know why all this other stuff, but vim SSH D, just do command line completion, can't when there's that many similarly named files, D underscore config, right? In here, I did that originally. That's what I always knew I had to do. I did this because research showed me I had to turn it on. And then I finally also did this. And I had to do those 3 separate edits. Without those 3 edits, it wouldn't have worked. None of this other stuff I did. That's all turned on by default. But having done those things now, you can create a icon, a shortcut on your desktop that has the full line to do an SSH command. You practice that in PowerShell because Microsoft PowerShell provides the SSH program that runs in the correct network context. I can't do this command, unfortunately, even on WSL2 because of its networking context. They might change that at some point. But, you know, this is all the precursor stuff that goes into the shortcut, but you get rid of that. And then this, see, I'm logged in, no password challenge. That's the line, that's the magic line. So once you get that magic line, you just put it in a Windows shortcut and then logging into things like containers. This is a little Windows problem. Sometimes closing windows don't really close windows. If you don't know how to do that trick with Windows Tab, it gets really hard to close those full screen terminals. Microsoft, you gotta get your act together. So now I've got this really quick link. Bam, I'm inside Ubuntu. Just to make sure you get the point, it's Ubuntu. Sudo apt update. There it is, updating itself off of the Ubuntu repo. There's nothing to update on my system, but if there were, sudo apt upgrade, and that would apply anything that was waiting to be installed as service packs. What else is there to say? This is where all my automated scripts are going to run now. I recreated my local Linux server environment just because I wanted to make a clean, fresh start and understand as much as I could that was going on in it. It's a practical alternative to the local machine, which is also a great way to do it, but my local machine I get into with just a normal Windows subsystem for Linux terminal here, and that's my local machine. That's my not local machine. I develop things under Jupyter. I copy and paste out of Jupyter into WSL, test it local on my physical local machine. That's that same GitHub directory that's accessible from the Windows, the subsystem for Linux, as is accessible, of course, because it's my home directory on the Windows side. So all my GitHubs are all unified. And then when I want to do that on a physically remote server to really simulate, say, running it in the cloud, I'll put it here. Now, cd home, it's going to be quite empty, mkdir github. And so now I'll git clone things into this directory whenever I have a repo that I want to pull over to this container and run it here, maybe set it up with scheduling. And that's it. Thanks for joining me. I hope to see you again soon, and don't forget to subscribe.